In the year 108, the Roman Empire stood at the height of its power, stretching from the deserts of North Africa to the cold frontier of Britain. Rome had conquered kingdoms, crushed rebellions, and built an army that seemed almost impossible to defeat. But somewhere beyond the northern frontier, one Roman legion marched into the mist, and its fate became one of history's greatest military mysteries. Legio IX Hispana was thousands of soldiers strong, heavily armed, disciplined, and trained for war. Then its story seems to disappear. So what really happened to the Roman legion that vanished without a trace? The story begins long before that, a mystery. The Ninth Legion was one of Rome's old military formations, carrying a reputation built through decades of campaigns. Its soldiers fought during Rome's expansion across Europe, and by the 1st century, the legion had become part of the enormous machine that protected the empire. When Emperor Claudius launched the Roman invasion of Britain in AD 43, Roman armies crossed the Channel and began a brutal campaign against the native kingdoms. The Ninth Legion was eventually stationed in Britain, where Rome was trying to transform a distant and hostile land into another province of the empire. But Britain was not an easy conquest. Roman soldiers faced unfamiliar terrain, hostile tribes, thick forests, marshes, and constant resistance. Roads had to be constructed, forts had to be defended, supply lines had to cross enormous distances, and then came one of the most dangerous moments in the legion's history. In AD 60 or 61, during the Great Rebellion led by Boudica, the Ninth Legion marched against the advancing Britons. Boudica's rebellion had exploded across southeastern Britain after Roman authorities brutally mistreated her and her family. What began as resistance quickly became a massive uprising. Roman settlements were destroyed, thousands were killed, and the rebellion threatened to tear apart Roman control of Britain. The Ninth Legion attempted to intervene, but the Roman force was overwhelmed. The legion's infantry suffered catastrophic losses, and the surviving troops were forced to retreat. Rome eventually crushed Boudica's rebellion, but the disaster demonstrated something the empire understood well. Even Rome's greatest armies could be destroyed when they underestimated their enemies. The Ninth survived. It was rebuilt, and for decades afterward, it continued serving in Britain. But the northern frontier was becoming increasingly dangerous. Rome's power was concentrated around forts, roads, and fortified settlements. Beyond them lay territories controlled by tribes that had no intention of accepting Roman rule. Among the most important of these peoples were the Brigantes, whose territory covered much of northern Britain. Roman governors fought to control the region. Fortifications expanded, armies moved north, and eventually the Ninth Legion was stationed at Eboracum, modern York. York became one of the most important Roman military bases in Britain. From there, the legion could respond to threats across the northern frontier, but sometime during the early 2nd century, something happened. The historical record becomes strangely quiet. The Ninth Legion appears in Britain, then its trail becomes uncertain. Later, Roman inscriptions no longer clearly identified as an active legion, and generations afterward, the unit seems to have vanished from the military record. That silence created a legend. For centuries, historians wondered whether the entire legion had been annihilated in a single, catastrophic battle. The image is almost irresistible. Thousands of Romani soldiers marching into northern Britain, an enemy army appearing from the forests, the legion surrounded, standards falling, commanders killed, and by the end of the battle, the Ninth Legion gone. But history is rarely that simple. The earliest surviving evidence does not tell us that the legion disappeared in one dramatic battle. Instead, historians have had to reconstruct its fate from fragments, inscriptions, military records, archaeological discoveries, and later references. One of the most important clues came from the legion's name. Legio IX Hispana. For generations, The absence of later evidence encouraged the belief that it had been destroyed in Britain. The mystery became even more famous in the 20th century when archaeologists uncovered evidence of Roman military activity that seemed to fit the story of a violent northern disaster. Popular books and films transformed the Ninth Legion into a symbol of Rome's mysterious defeat. But then the evidence became more complicated. Roman inscription discovered in the Netherlands appeared to suggest that soldiers of the Ninth may have been connected to the empire's military presence on the continent. If the legion survived beyond Britain, the entire traditional story changed. The famous disappearance might not have been a single massacre at all. It could have been a transfer, a gradual disbandment, a military disaster whose details were lost, or a combination of events.